The sound of applause filled the gallery, but Nadine barely heard it. Her hand trembled slightly as she held the microphone, her gaze fixed on the unfinished painting behind her, a swirl of white and gray, frozen mid-stroke. 2 years of peace, and still, she couldn't finish it. The guests around her, art critics, collectors, press, whispered her name like she was a mystery that had finally found light. But Nadine knew peace wasn't a destination. It was a daily decision. Miss Owens, a journalist, called from the front row, her tone sharp, hungry. "Your art speaks about silence and redemption. Is it true the billionaire once bought your silence?" The room fell still. Nadine felt the question land like glass shattering against her chest. Her assistant shifted nervously nearby, ready to intervene. But Nadine didn't flinch. She met the journalist's eyes, steady, unshaken. "Yes," she said clearly. "He bought my silence." Cameras clicked. People gasped. She took a slow breath, her voice soft but cutting through the noise. "But he never owned my voice." The room erupted, questions fired from every direction. Her assistant tried to lead her away, but Nadine stayed still for a moment, letting the chaos unfold. She wasn't that frightened girl from 2 years ago. She was the woman who had learned that truth didn't destroy, lies did. A flash went off. Another question rose, but her eyes drifted to the back of the crowd, and everything inside her froze. He was there. Lorenzo Sinclair. The same man whose name once filled every headline with power and scandal. The man who had broken her heart with silence and pride. He wasn't in a suit this time. No security detail, no polished perfection. Just a man standing in the back, his expression unreadable, his eyes carrying years of regret. For a second, the noise faded. The reporters, the crowd, the lights, they disappeared. Only their eyes existed at that moment. She looked away first. Her assistant leaned close. "Are you okay?" Nadine nodded, but her voice was low. "I thought I'd stopped seeing ghosts." She turned and walked toward the exit, her heels echoing softly across the marble floor. Behind her, applause began again, polite, empty, fading into background noise. But Lorenzo didn't move. He watched her retreat, his chest tight with words he'd never said. 2 years of watching her from afar, her art, her interviews, her quiet rise, and still nothing compared to seeing her now. His whisper was almost lost under the sound of the closing doors. He paused, voice breaking. "I only wish I'd learned how to protect it with you." Outside, Nadine stepped into the cold night air. The wind brushed against her hair, carrying a memory she wished she could forget. His touch, his promise, his silence. Her driver opened the car door, but she didn't get in. She looked back through the glass wall of the gallery. Lorenzo was gone. Still, her pulse raced like he was right behind her. 2 years of distance. 2 years of healing. 2 years of convincing herself that peace meant never crossing paths with him again. But the universe, cruel or kind, had other plans. Her assistant came up behind her. "The media is already spinning your answer, Nadine. Should I handle it?" Nadine's voice was calm. "No, let them talk. I'm done hiding." She slid into the car, her reflection catching in the window. Composed, serene, but her eyes betrayed the storm within. As the city lights blurred by, she whispered to herself, "Freedom isn't free. It always costs something." The car turned the corner, leaving behind the gallery filled with her paintings, every one of them a confession she'd once been too afraid to speak. And somewhere in the quiet, a new chapter began. Before we continue, tap subscribe to enrich Billionaires romance stories, where every tale reminds you that love built on silence always demands reckoning. Now, let's see what happens when peace meets the past. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of Nadine's Chicago gallery, painting soft gold on the hardwood floor. The scent of oil paint and fresh coffee filled the space. Customers walked slowly, pausing in front of her latest collection, healing in color. 2 years ago, Nadine could barely lift a brush. Now, her paintings sold before they even dried. Each piece carried emotion. Scars turned into beauty, pain turned into grace. Her art wasn't loud. It was calm, confident, and deeply human. She stood near the front, watching a young woman trace the air in front of one of her canvases. The woman whispered, "This one feels like forgiveness." Nadine smiled faintly. "That's what I hoped someone would feel." The woman turned, surprised. "You're the artist?" Nadine nodded. "I am." There was pride in her voice, but quiet pride. The kind that came from survival, not fame. When the last customer left, Nadine exhaled slowly and looked around. Her small gallery wasn't extravagant, but it was hers. Every inch of it reflected her truth. Her assistant, Eva, entered carrying a box of brochures. "You've got that look again," Eva teased. "The one where you stare into space like you're painting with your thoughts." Nadine chuckled softly. "Just thinking how different life feels now." Eva smiled. "You earned it. Peace suits you." Peace did suit her, though sometimes it felt fragile, like glass that could shatter with one wrong memory. Later that afternoon, a delivery man walked in carrying a cream-colored envelope. "Delivery for Miss Owens," he said. Nadine wiped her hands and accepted it, expecting paperwork from a supplier. But the moment she saw the emblem on the wax seal, gold, intricate, unfamiliar, her heart skipped. Inside was a single letter written on thick, expensive stationery. "Dear Miss Owens, we are pleased to inform you that your recent collection has been selected for exhibition at the New York Metropolitan Art Hall. Your work, defined by emotional depth and grace, represents the rebirth of truth in modern expression. All travel and accommodation will be arranged on your behalf. With admiration, the selection board." Her fingers tightened around the paper. New York, the city where her silence once became a headline. Eva rushed over. "What is it?" Nadine handed her the letter. Eva's eyes widened. "The Metropolitan? Nadine, this is huge. Do you realize how many artists dream of this?" Nadine tried to smile, but her voice came out softer than intended. "It's unexpected." She looked at the signature again. Elegant, formal, unsigned by name. "Anonymous?" Eva asked, peering closer. "Yes, just the selection board." Eva's grin widened. "Who cares? You're going to New York." But Nadine's chest tightened. New York wasn't just another city. It was where everything had fallen apart, where her silence became public, where love turned into headlines. She folded the letter carefully, feeling the weight of it in her hand. "Sometimes," she murmured, "the past has a strange way of calling back." The following morning, Eva found Nadine standing by the window, staring at the invitation again. "You haven't replied yet?" Eva asked, sipping her coffee. Nadine shook her head. "Not yet. I'm still thinking." Eva rolled her eyes. "Think faster. They're offering full sponsorship. No one turns down that kind of opportunity." Nadine hesitated. "It just feels too easy, too sudden." Eva tilted her head. "You think someone's behind it?" Nadine didn't answer. Instead, she glanced at the envelope again. At the bottom, there was a subtle embossed mark she hadn't noticed before, and sponsored by a private patron. Eva caught her look. "See? That's how these exhibitions work. Some anonymous art lovers fund the show. You're famous enough now to attract attention." "Maybe," Nadine said quietly. Still, she couldn't shake the unease growing in her chest. Anonymous generosity had never come without a price in her life. Eva clapped her hands. "I'm booking your ticket. You're going. Period." Nadine laughed softly. "You're impossible. That's why you keep me around." As Eva walked away, Nadine whispered under her breath, "Whoever you are, thank you. I just hope you want my art, not my story." Outside, snow began to fall, light, fleeting, like memories that refused to melt away. That night, Nadine sat at her kitchen table, the invitation open beside her cup of tea. The city hummed faintly beyond her window. Her life had become beautifully ordinary, teaching workshops, running her gallery, painting without deadlines. She finally felt free. But something about the offer tugged at her. The chance to show her art in New York, the same city that once chewed her up and spat her out, felt like fate's cruel dare. She called her mother, who now lived in Atlanta. "What if saying yes opens old wounds?" Nadine asked softly. Her mother's voice was warm. "Sometimes healing isn't about staying away, baby. It's about seeing the place again and realizing it doesn't own you anymore." Nadine closed her eyes. "You think I should go? I think you already know you will." A faint smile touched Nadine's lips. Her mother was right. Fear meant unfinished healing. She picked up her laptop and typed her reply. "To the selection board, thank you for this honor. I accept your invitation." When she hit send, her chest tightened, half anxiety, half freedom. She whispered to herself, "This time, I'm going for me." 3 days later, a courier arrived with travel documents. Eva tore into the envelope with excitement, handing Nadine her itinerary and hotel details. "You're staying at the Hayworth in Manhattan," Eva said. "That's 5 stars, Nadine. This sponsor isn't playing around." Nadine flipped through the documents until something caught her eye. A small card clipped to the hotel confirmation. At the top corner, embossed in silver, were 2 initials she hadn't seen in years. LS Holdings. Her hands froze. The room went silent. Eva frowned. "What's wrong?" Nadine slowly lowered the card. "Nothing. I just recognized the name." Eva leaned closer. "Should I know it?" Nadine shook her head, masking the tremor in her voice. "No, it's fine." She slipped the card into the folder and set it aside, forcing a calm smile. But inside, her piece cracked, just slightly. LS Holdings. The same company that once owned half of Lorenzo Sinclair's empire. Coincidence? Maybe, but Nadine had lived long enough to know that life didn't deal in coincidences, only unfinished business. She turned to her canvas, the same one she couldn't finish for weeks. With a trembling hand, she picked up her brush. The color she chose wasn't white this time. It was red, deep, alive, uncertain. Her voice was steady when she whispered to herself, "Freedom doesn't mean forgetting." Outside, the snow fell harder. Somewhere across the city, a man looked at a boarding pass with her name on it and said quietly, "See you soon, Nadine." The air inside the Metropolitan Art Hall buzzed with admiration and curiosity. Chandeliers shimmered above a crowd dressed in black and gold, their voices blending into a low hum of sophistication. Cameras flashed. Wine glasses clinked. At the center of it all stood Nadine, calm, poised, dressed in a simple ivory gown that contrasted sharply against the bold colors of her art. Her collection, Truth in Silence, stretched across the gallery walls. Each painting captured a stage of her rebirth, the fall, the quiet, the fire, and the rise. Every stroke spoke without words. A journalist whispered to another, "You can feel the pain in her work, but it's not bitter, it's alive." Nadine stood beside her largest piece, a portrait of a faceless woman standing before an open door. The plaque beneath read, "Leaving doesn't mean losing." She watched as guests moved from one canvas to another, absorbing every emotion she had poured into them. Eva appeared beside her, grinning. "You did it. Look around. You're the talk of New York tonight." Nadine smiled softly. 2 years ago, they only talked about the scandal. Tonight, they're talking about art. "That's enough for me, more than enough," Eva said. "You're free now. Free." The word lingered. But Nadine wasn't sure freedom felt this heavy. A coordinator motioned for her to step toward the podium. "Miss Owens, they're ready for your remarks." As she took the stage, the crowd fell silent. The woman who once hid from microphones now stood beneath their glow. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady. "Art has taught me that silence never saves, it only delays truth." The crowd leaned closer, her words sinking deep. Nadine's speech flowed from her like a confession. I once believed silence was strength, that staying quiet would protect what I loved. But I learned that silence doesn't guard love, it guards fear. A murmur rippled through the audience. She continued, her tone calm but piercing. Every painting you see here was born from the noise that silence left behind, the noise of regret, the sound of a truth too long buried. But pain can be transformed, and tonight, I'm proof of that. Applause filled the hall, not the polite kind, but the kind that came from hearts moved. Nadine smiled faintly, lowering her head in gratitude. But as she stepped off the stage, a flicker in the crowd caught her attention. A man stood near the back, half-shadowed beneath the archway. No camera focused on him, no flash dared approach. But his presence struck her like a sudden chill. He was watching her, Lorenzo. For a moment the years dissolved. She saw not the billionaire who had once bought her silence, but the man who had once whispered her name like a vow. Her breath caught. Their eyes met, steady, piercing, full of memories neither of them had invited. She felt her heart stutter. The applause faded, the chatter blurred. Lorenzo's expression didn't carry the arrogance she remembered. His face was softer, older, touched by humility. Ava touched her arm. You okay? Nadine blinked, regaining her composure. Yes, just the lights. But it wasn't the lights that shook her. It was the past standing 20 feet away, breathing the same air again. As the event continued, Nadine tried to lose herself in small talk, smiling at guests, thanking donors, answering polite questions. But her focus kept slipping toward the back of the hall, to the one face that shouldn't have been there. When the lights dimmed for the final toast, he was gone. Relief mixed with disappointment she didn't want to name. After the event, the crowd thinned. Nadine lingered, walking between her paintings. The hall felt quieter now, the echo of applause replaced by the hum of cleaners packing up. She stopped before her final piece, In Freedom's Quiet Price, the same unfinished canvas she had finally completed after receiving the invitation. The woman in the painting stood before an open sea, her back turned to the world. Still breathtaking, a deep voice said behind her. Nadine froze. She turned slowly. Lorenzo stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking at her the way he once did, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he blinked. She steadied her voice. You shouldn't be here. I know, he said quietly. But I needed to be. Why? She asked. His gaze shifted toward the painting. Because I've spent 2 years trying to understand what freedom looks like, and now I see it. The air thickened with everything unspoken. Nadine crossed her arms. If you came here for forgiveness, I don't owe it to you. He shook his head. I didn't come to own your story this time. I came to understand it. For a moment, neither spoke. Just quiet, the kind that held both pain and peace. Nadine exhaled slowly. You always had a way of showing up where peace lives. Lorenzo smiled faintly. Peace and I never got along until you left. She turned back to her painting. So this is what understanding looks like? Watching from the shadows. He stepped closer, careful not to cross the line between them. I didn't want to interrupt your night. You deserve this. You've earned every ounce of respect in this room. She studied him for a moment. The arrogance that once clung to him was gone. The man standing before her carried loss in his posture, not power. I thought you'd forgotten me, he said softly. I tried, she replied. But forgetting isn't freedom. He nodded slowly. Then I suppose I should stop trying to forget too. She glanced at him, her tone steady. You don't have to keep proving you've changed, Lorenzo. I can see it. But change doesn't mean we go backward. I know, he said. I just needed to tell you I'm proud of you. Her eyes softened for the first time that night. Pride was never what I wanted from you. He smiled sadly. I know that too. For a long moment they stood in silence, Not the heavy kind from years ago, but one laced with understanding. Finally, she whispered, "You should go." He nodded. "If you ever want to finish the conversation, you know where to find me." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving her alone with the echo of her heartbeat. Nadine lingered in the gallery long after the doors closed. The janitor turned off the last row of lights, leaving only the spotlight over Aunt Freedom's quiet price. She looked at it and whispered, "Some ghosts don't haunt. They remind me." Her reflection in the glass looked different, stronger, steadier, unafraid. The past hadn't returned to break her. It had returned to show her how far she'd come. She walked toward the exit, her heels tapping softly against the marble floor. Outside, snowflakes began to fall again, light and endless, like time. From across the street, a man watched her go. Lorenzo stood under a street lamp, hands in his coat pockets. He didn't follow, he just smiled faintly, whispering to the cold air, "You finally found your light." And this time, he let her walk away. Some ghosts don't haunt, they remind. If this story speaks to you, tap subscribe to Rich Billionaires Romance Stories, where love returns not to control, but to heal. Hit like if you believe some people reappear, not to reopen wounds, but to show how far you've grown. The next evening, the streets of New York glowed with amber lights reflecting off rain-soaked pavement. Nadine stayed late at her rented studio, cleaning brushes and rearranging unfinished canvases. The city's noise hummed faintly through the walls, steady, distant, alive. A knock broke her focus. She glanced at the clock. Almost 11. Nadine frowned and walked to the door. "We're closed," she called. A familiar voice answered softly, "Then consider me late for an appointment." She froze. Slowly she opened the door. Lorenzo stood there, a small bouquet of white lilies in his hand, raindrops still clinging to his coat. Her tone was measured. "Buying flowers now instead of boardrooms?" He smiled faintly. "I heard artists like gestures." "What do you want, Lorenzo?" she asked, arms folded. He stepped inside, careful not to crowd her. "To see your work, properly this time. Not surrounded by cameras." Nadine gestured toward the walls. "They're right there. Look all you want." He walked slowly along the room, eyes moving from canvas to canvas. Each painting reflected emotion he once caused: sorrow, recovery, grace. His expression softened with each step. "You've changed," he said quietly. "So have you," she replied. He turned to face her. "I'm not sure mine was for the better." She studied him, the loosened tie, the tired eyes. He looked human now, flawed, real. "Why are you really here?" she asked. He hesitated, then said, "Because I couldn't leave New York knowing I saw you, heard you, and still said nothing." Lorenzo stopped in front of her newest piece, a muted abstract of red and gold, layered and raw. "It feels different from your others," he said softly. "It is," she replied. "It's the first one I painted without pain." He nodded slowly. "You found peace through the same thing I used to silence you." Nadine blinked. "You think art was silence?" "For me, it was noise," he admitted. "Every headline, every deal, every lie, noise I thought was power." She set her brush down. "And what is it now?" "Quiet," he said. "But not the kind that hides, the kind that listens." Nadine studied him, searching for the man she once loved in the one standing before her. There was no arrogance now, only reflection. "You don't look like a man used to being quiet," she said. He smiled gently. "Maybe I learned from you." A pause lingered between them, heavy but not cold. "You know," he added, "I didn't realize how strong you were until I saw you tonight, standing there, speaking your truth while the world watched. That kind of calm." He trailed off. "That calm," she interrupted softly, "was born from breaking." Their eyes met, steady, unflinching. He nodded slowly. "Then I admire the way you rebuilt." The compliment didn't feel romantic. It felt sincere, like a confession of gratitude. Nadine turned toward her easel, tracing a faint line of paint with her fingertip. I didn't rebuild to be admired, Lorenzo. I rebuilt it to be free. Time passed without notice. The city outside quieted, leaving only the faint rhythm of rain. Lorenzo found himself sitting on the floor near her easel, while Nadine leaned against a stool, her hair loose, her tone calm. They talked about everything. The scandal, the lies, the silence that once defined them. I used to think silence was protection, Nadine said. But it was fear pretending to be peaceful. Lorenzo nodded. And I mistook control for love. She smiled faintly. We were both wrong. He looked down, voice low. The night you left, I told myself I didn't need to explain. That you already knew how I felt. But the truth is, I didn't even know how to say it. You didn't have to, she said quietly. Your silence said enough. Her words weren't cruel, they were honest. He met her eyes. Does it still hurt? Sometimes, she admitted. But hurt isn't a weakness anymore. It's a memory. It reminds me of what not to become. The honesty between them filled the room. No tears, no shouting. Just the truth, fragile and clean. She finally said, I thought freedom meant walking away. He lifted his gaze. And now? Now I see it means facing what hurts me without fear. He breathed deeply, as if her words gave him permission to exhale for the first time in years. Then let me face it with you, he said softly. Silence settled again, but this time it didn't weigh on them. It felt safe. Nadine turned away to wash her brushes, her movements slow, thoughtful. Lorenzo watched her with quiet admiration. There was no desire in his gaze, only respect and recognition. You always find peace in a mess, he said. It's where life hides, she replied. He smiled faintly. Do you ever miss us? She froze, brushed midair. The question wasn't cruel, only human. She turned to face him. I miss the idea of who we could have been, not who we were. He nodded. That's fair. For a moment the years between them faded. The unspoken forgiveness, the unfinished words, all lingered in that quiet room. She walked over and sat across from him. You know what's strange? She said softly. This feels peaceful. You and me, without pretending. That's because we're finally honest, he said. Her lips curved faintly. Maybe honesty is what we needed all along. Their eyes held, not searching, not begging, just seeing. It was the kind of connection that didn't need touch to feel close. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle. You should go before the sun makes this feel real. He rose slowly. If this is peace, I'll take the memory. He paused at the door. Thank you for letting me see the world through your truth. She smiled, small and steady. Good night, Lorenzo. He hesitated. Good night, Nadine. When the door closed, she looked around the studio. At the canvases, the colors, the space that had held both pain and clarity. Her heart didn't ache. It breathed. She whispered, some endings are just pauses before understanding. If you've ever faced someone who once broke you and found strength in your calm, click like. Subscribe to Winch Rich Billionaires romance stories, where love doesn't come from fantasy but from truth, healing, and second chances. Here, every story reminds you that peace after pain isn't weakness, it's proof of growth. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that honesty doesn't reopen wounds, it helps them close for good. Because sometimes, love returns, not to reclaim what was lost, but to show what survived. Morning came with noise, not the sound of traffic, but the rush of phones ringing and notifications exploding. Eva burst into Nadine's studio, phone in hand. You need to see this. Nadine looked up from her canvas. What happened? Eva turned the screen toward her. Headlines glared in bold. Billionaire funds, ex-wife's return to the art scene. Lorenzo Sinclair's silent sponsorship exposed. Nadine's chest tightened. Beneath the headlines were pictures of her from the exhibition, smiling, poised, paired with his image beside her paintings. The article twisted everything. They made her success sound like charity. Eva muttered. They're making it look like you couldn't stand on your own. Nadine took a slow breath. That's the story they want, but I know mine. Her voice didn't shake. The woman who once ran from judgment now stood in it without fear. Still, the ache beneath her calm whispered, why did he keep this from me? And by afternoon the news spread everywhere. Every network repeated the same line. Lorenzo Sinclair secretly funded his ex-wife's career revival. Talk shows debated motives. Is this redemption or manipulation? One host asked. Nadine watched quietly from her office. The room was silent, except for the voice of the commentator dissecting her life. Eva clenched her fists. We can sue for defamation. No, Nadine said firmly. That gives them what they want, a reaction. But they're making it seem like you're still dependent on him. Nadine turned off the television. Let them. The truth isn't theirs to rewrite. She stood by the window watching the skyline. It wasn't anger that filled her. It was exhaustion. She had fought too hard for peace to let the past dictate her again. But deep inside, something still hurt. Not the scandal, not the headlines, but the thought that Lorenzo hadn't told her the truth. That evening, Nadine walked into a local news studio. Cameras flashed. The anchor greeted her nervously, unsure what to expect. She smiled faintly. Let's talk about the truth, she said as the broadcast began. The anchor cleared his throat. Miss Owens, the world wants to know, did Mr. Sinclair fund your exhibition? Yes, Nadine answered calmly. But not for the reasons you think. She leaned forward, her tone sincere. I didn't come back for him. I came back for closure. And maybe closure became understanding. The host blinked. So, you're saying this isn't reconciliation? Nadine smiled. Healing doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it's about learning you can stand beside what once broke you, and not fall apart. The studio fell silent. Her words trended within an hour. Comments flooded in. Grace, dignity, strength. She didn't just defend herself. She redefined the narrative. The woman who once stayed silent had spoken, and the world listened. Across town, Lorenzo watched the interview from his office. The screen reflected in his eyes, his expression unreadable at first, then softening with pride. He turned to his assistant. Call a press conference. Within hours, reporters crowded the Sinclair Tower lobby. Cameras flashed as Lorenzo stepped to the podium, dressed simply. No entourage, no armor. I have one statement, he said. The woman you call my past is the only truth I ever learned to respect. The room fell quiet. He continued, voice steady. If supporting her art makes me guilty, then I accept that. Because Nadine Owens taught me that silence destroys, but truth rebuilds. He didn't take questions. He didn't need to. That night, the same media that twisted their story began rewriting it, not as scandal, but as redemption. Public sympathy shifted. Admiration replaced gossip. Two stories, once separate, had found peace in the same truth. Later that night, Nadine found herself standing on the rooftop of the gallery, the city lights stretching endlessly beneath her. The air was cool, calm, her favorite kind of quiet. A familiar voice broke the silence. You always did like high places. She turned. Lorenzo stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets. I thought peace meant leaving you behind, she said. He stepped closer, eyes gentle. Peace brought you back to me. They didn't reach for each other. They didn't need to. Their silence said everything words couldn't. I didn't plan this, he said softly. I just wanted you to shine without fear. Nadine nodded. Maybe that's what we both needed, to stop fearing what the truth might cost. They shared a quiet embrace, not to rekindle the past, but to honor the growth between them. Healing is not returning to what broke you. It's finding meaning in why it happened. Weeks passed quietly. The exhibition that began as a risk had turned into a triumph. Critics called it a story, told in color, and collectors flew from across the country to see Nadine's work. Each canvas sold faster than the last, but success didn't feel loud. It felt calm, a steady heartbeat instead of applause. On the final evening, Nadine stood alone in the empty gallery. The walls that once carried her pain now gleamed with soft light. The last painting was being packed away, the faceless woman she had finally finished. Eva entered, smiling proudly. "You did it, Nadine. Record attendance. Every review called it breathtaking." Nadine nodded, though her smile carried something quiet. Peace doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it's the sound of knowing you've done enough. Eva hesitated. "Will you stay in New York?" Nadine shook her head. "No, Chicago's home. That's where I found myself." As she turned to leave, Eva called softly, "You're finally free, aren't you?" Nadine's reply was calm. "Yes, but freedom has a price, and I've paid it." Outside, the city lights glimmered across wet streets. Her reflection in the window looked stronger, older, content. The next morning, the airport buzzed with quiet motion. Boarding calls, suitcase wheels, farewells muffled by distance. Nadine clutched her ticket, heading toward her gate, when a familiar voice stopped her. Leaving without saying goodbye? She turned. Lorenzo stood near the gate, dressed in a simple gray sweater and jeans. No bodyguards, no cameras, just him. Her heart skipped once, but her tone stayed even. "You don't owe me a goodbye, Lorenzo." "I know," he said, his voice gentle. "I came to thank you." "For what?" she asked. "For teaching me what peace costs." She exhaled slowly, eyes searching his face. The sharpness she once knew was gone. There was no control in his posture, no pride in his tone, only quiet acceptance. "You always wanted to win," she said softly. "Not this time," he replied. "Peace isn't something you win, it's something you learn to live with." A faint smile touched her lips. "Then maybe you've learned what I couldn't teach you before." He nodded once. "Maybe. Or maybe I finally started listening." The boarding call echoed through the terminal. Nadine adjusted her scarf, preparing to go. He stepped closer. "Do you regret it, walking away?" "No," she said simply. "Regret belongs to silence. I chose my voice instead." He nodded. "And you made it loud enough for the world to hear." She smiled faintly. "I didn't do it for the world. I did it for me." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them carried every word they had never said. "I'm not for sale anymore," Nadine whispered. Lorenzo's answer came like a confession. "Good. Then maybe this time, it's love." Her breath caught, but she didn't respond. Some truths didn't need echoing. Instead, she stepped forward and hugged him briefly. A quiet final gesture. No passion, no tears, just closure. When she pulled away, he looked at her with peace in his eyes, the same peace she had been chasing all along. As she walked toward the gate, she didn't look back. She didn't have to. Some goodbyes don't break you. They complete you. Back in Chicago, Nadine's studio smelled of fresh paint and rain. Canvases leaned against the walls, but one stood alone at the center, blank, waiting. Days passed before she picked up her brush again. Each stroke was deliberate, soft, honest. When she finished, she stepped back and smiled. The painting showed two figures walking in opposite directions under the same sunrise. The colors blended, gold, soft blue, and gentle gray. She titled it, "The Price of Peace." Underneath, she signed it, not with her full name, but her initials. N.O., no longer a Nadine Owens, the billionaire's wife. Now, to Nadine Owens, the woman who survived herself. As the paint dried, she whispered, "Peace isn't losing love. It's finding yourself where love once left you." Her reflection in the glass didn't look haunted anymore. It looked whole. She placed the brush down for the last time, wiped her hands, and smiled. The narrator's voice returned, soft but steady. Peace isn't found in silence. It's found in the strength to speak after you've been silenced. It's in the forgiveness that doesn't ask for permission. It's in walking away, not to forget, but to grow. Lorenzo's name faded from her story, not out of bitterness, but balance. His chapter had taught her what boundaries meant. The camera would close on Nadine sitting by her window, coffee in hand, sunlight spilling across her latest canvas. "Freedom," she said quietly, "isn't a gift someone gives you. It's the one you earn when you stop letting the past define you." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she didn't look toward the door. She looked ahead. True peace isn't silence. It's freedom with grace. If this story moved you, comment "Peace has a price" below. Subscribe to Enrich Billionaires Romance Stories for more emotional tales that remind us money builds walls, truth tears them down, and real love only grows where honesty lives. Share this story with someone who has learned that letting go doesn't mean losing. It means beginning again.